That's okay.
Work work sessions are an opportunity for board members to discuss issues informally with staff and invited guests. The board encourages members of the public to attend work sessions and to listen to the discussion, but there is generally no opportunity for public comment. Members of the public wishing to address the board are welcome to do so during the board's regularly scheduled meeting held twice monthly. So the first thing is board communication. We have 10 minutes there, and we have the topics today are the budget process for 10 minutes, and then the concept paper, which is another 40 minutes. And we're starting about 6 minutes late today. So maybe we can kind of be brief on our board communications. Who would like to start on that? Commissioner Webb?
Yeah. I put out a call to my friends at Extension, asking them what they felt were the biggest issues during this COVID crisis for rural areas. And I was fascinated that they came back unanimously talking about the fact that the absence of a reliable broadband in rural parts of the county is really causing people a lot of problems. And that it's particularly bad for the school children. Because now that they're so now that everything is online, and even talked about, I think that Napa has created a situation where they put Wi-Fi access through their parking lot, so people can come in and park their cars and access the Wi-Fi, and their kids can sit in the car and do their homework. I just thought that was interesting. I mean, I was expecting to hear from the farm people about, not being able to sell their products or something like that. But it was great consensus that the access to broadband, or the lack of it, were very troublesome.
I would agree with you, Commissioner Webb. I think everybody would agree with that. I've talked to parents. I think some schools the parents have gone and bought a hotspot sort of thing so they can do it, but it really shows inequity. I talked to Ton Point today, and they're having a similar issue with their kids that are trying to do pre-apprentice programs to the unions. But I also talked to Don Boone, and he can speak for himself, of course, but I think that I certainly agree with you that this is something that we want to put on our list of doing something about it, including in the strategic plan. And Don has some resources on that, and so he can also talk to that when we come to that. But thank you for that. Who else would like to speak today? Commissioner Thompson, do you have anything you'd like to add for communication?
This is Commissioner Thompson. I have some things I'd like to add. I had to undo I'm in a parking lot. So AOC had a call yesterday of the legislative committee. So every district and many commissioners and judges weighed in. AOC is gathering fiscal information from all the counties on the cost of addressing COVID, the extra cost of addressing COVID. But they wanted to hear from us, particularly Rob Bovett, about what were the issues. We don't have a systematic way of gathering information. People call us or we call them, and so we have spotty, and it may be wide coverage. We don't have a systematic way of gathering information. So if we're putting items into our basket, I would put a systematic way of gathering information about public concerns in that basket, because I think it'll benefit us as we go forward in a variety of ways. I talked about the lack of testing, and this isn't a partisan issue. It's an issue of lacking data. So we're addressing the remedies and the cost of the remedies. So we have isolation. We have the cost of isolation, which is devastating to many businesses and families and the whole supply chain along a variety of dimensions. But no data, we're flying blind. We need tests. So Gina Nickel assured me that AOC, this is top of mind with AOC, and that they're working on that. So that gives me hope going forward in that regard. Hospitals are at risk, particularly rural hospitals. Kevin Leahy assured me that CMH is okay. I'll be interested if Commissioner Queel, sorry, I can't mute that siren. Commissioner Queel can weigh in on that, but Kevin Leahy's opinion to me was, because I checked with him, was that CMH is going to be okay. The overload on human services, Alan Evans reached out to let me know that they have their cash reserves and that they have done a comprehensive ask, and that what they're asking of Clackamas County is only our pro rata share, nothing more, and that they are agreeable going forward to continue coordinating with us to assure us that we are paying our fair share. But
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. I'm sorry. I have to cut you off there because we're trying to keep the schedule so we can get everything in today. And we're going to talk about some of those issues going forward. Commissioner Quayle, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, just as Commissioner Thompson was speaking about, Columbia Rural Hospital is looking for as many avenues of reimbursement as possible, but again, it's because Columbia Rural Hospital is self-insured, so when the longer this goes on, it's a dollar for dollar reimbursement on unemployment and expenses like that will really drain coffers around the hospital. From the foundation standpoint, obviously, we've been gutted, and I'm really rebuilding things from scratch. And so I was just on a call from Oregon with the Oregon community and the North Coast leadership team, and they were, expressing the same thing. And communities up and down the coast, rural communities are really struggling because of, the lack of tourism. So much of our economy depends on tourism, and obviously the county experienced the TLT dollars that have dissipated and how that impacts us. But from the standpoint of Oregon Community Foundation, they've awarded grants, but they've been all to the metro area for the most part. And there hasn't been a connection to the rural areas, and there hasn't been a lot of grants even received from the rural areas. So a lot of nonprofits need to be reminded that this is a resource. Oregon Community Foundation has resources available and can link nonprofits to other sources of monies so that they can sustain operations. But there that focus has really been in the metro area and not the rural communities that really need it right now.
Thank you, Commissioner Aquila. I know that Suzanne Bonamici and I think Senator Wyden also expressed in their phone calls that they are trying to move some of this money out to the smaller areas. Commissioner Neverka, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I have two brief points. One is I have been talking to different constituents, and one of the things that I've heard is there is an overall increase in calls from scammers that are taking advantage of this time. That's one. The other is I don't know how to request this. I brought it up to Congresswoman Bonamici, but I think that open enrollment should be reconsidered and reopened.
Open enrollment for the health plan?
Yes, for health insurance. People are, we're told anything to do with COVID-19 as far as testing is covered, but the rest is murky. And I know I've talked to people who say they do not have, these are younger people who do not have health insurance. They couldn't afford it, so they didn't enroll, and now they wish they had, because they don't know if they do get sick. And when I say younger, these are people who are, 40, 50, 30, how they will pay their hospital bills.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I know that Congresswoman Bonamici was talking about working on that. So I'm sorry I'm cutting everybody short. We're running a little bit late, and I want to make sure we get to all that we need to talk about. So thank you, Commissioner Nebeker. Thank you, all the commissioners. So let's move now into the budget process, which we have about 10 minutes, and I'm assuming, is it Monica? Ms. Steele, are you going to be doing that one?
Sure. So I emailed out this past weekend a proposed change to the budget calendar, which proposes just kind of pushing the meetings out by a couple of weeks. And so hopefully all of you have a copy of that. Teresa also included it in the agenda packet. And so rather than having the first meeting, which would have been the reading of the budget message, taking place on April 29th, and then the next meeting being the start of going through the budget document being on May 6th, we're proposing starting the meetings on May 13th. And what would happen at that first noon meeting would be the reading of the budget message, and then anything else that the budget committee chooses to move forward with in that time frame. And then the district budget meetings, which were already scheduled to take place on May 13th prior to the 6 p.m. board meeting, would still take place at that time. And then we would move forward with additional countywide budget meetings being scheduled for the 20th, the 27th, 28th, with the regular public hearing and adoptions staying on track for June 10th and June 24th. Obviously, these meetings would be taking place in this type of setting, and so we're proposing having shorter meeting times just in regards to the fact that we're all sitting in different places talking on a phone. So this is what we're proposing at this time, and just looking for some support and feedback.
Monica, I know I sent my feedback that it seems very reasonable to me. Have you heard from the other commissioners at this point?
I have not.
So why don't we go around right now? Does anyone that's on the call what are your, let's say, let me start this over again. Thank you. Yes, go ahead. Dave.
It seems reasonable to me.
Thank you.
Reasonable to me too.
Okay. Commissioner Nebeker?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, Commissioner Thompson?
Okay, by me.
Okay, so it looks like we have a consensus to push that out another 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank
Or
you.
whatever, to the time frame that you've listed.
Okay, great, and I will go ahead and send that out to the lay budget committee members as well.
And do you have any other comments you'd like to make about the budget process?
Not at this time, no.
No, Commissioners, I just want to reiterate how it's gonna be a little bit of a different process than we might have imagined in the fall. Obviously, circumstances are just gonna dictate a little flexibility on all of our part as we go through this budget process, and so I just wanna reiterate, it's not necessarily the budget process of choice, it's the budget process of just, the pandemic. And so I just want to reiterate that as we go through.
Monica, do you anticipate, this is working with the staff and you just have to reach out to the other budget committee members?
Yeah, we're just kind of moving forward. The staff piece is just my department now working on things, and we're just gonna reach out to the lay budget committee members so that we can make sure that they're gonna have the capabilities of calling in, and then making sure that they're aware of the revised dates.
Okay, that sounds great, thank you. So we can put these on our calendar as far as you know.
Yes. Please do.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Let's move down to the concept paper, funding of not-for-profit safety net providers. And we've got about 40 minutes listed for that, and who's going to lead this discussion?
That'll be me, Commissioner. This is Don.
Thank you.
So this is a concept paper that we put together after the last board, I guess it was the time before last board work session. And it was based on a conversation we had that originated on the request we got from Helping Hands. And I had stated at the time that there was different ways we could approach that kind of a request that would be consistent with the county's role and also limit some of the county's reporting requirements. And so I had talked about having a funding strategy that would link to funding some of the bricks and mortars of some of these vital safety net nonprofits. So that is part A of my presentation. Part B, we'll be talking about a small grant program that is necessitated by the COVID-19 impacts. And so that'll be the second part. So, I mean, I won't go into all the philosophical details, but I do want to kind of talk a little bit about my perceptions about what a role of a county is really quickly. And what I've always said is that counties really fundamentally do two things. Now, granted, we do thousands of things, but they can fit into one of two categories. And the first category is that through your board and through a lot of other mechanisms, we interpret public interest. And public interest really just means the what of the county's work. It's what the county does. The other thing that counties do is that we maintain public trust, and that is really the how piece. By providing quality services in an effective and efficient way, we maintain public trust. And so those are really the two fundamentals that I think we focus on all the time. And if we focus on them well, then we have a great relationship with the public. We're seen as transparent, we're seen as reliable, and good things happen. So then you get into some of the fundamentals that are in the concept paper. And just really quickly, in my view, the county really plays one of three roles. And we either provide direct services, which is either done by county staff or is done by a contractor. We partner, which means we can become a financial partner to agencies that have a mission that is aligned with the county's mission, or sometimes we just support other folks and their missions even though it's not completely aligned with ours, just because it's good for the community. And I think it's really important to kind of always reflect upon which of these various roles that the county's playing, because how we play them is unique depending upon what the circumstances are. So the second fundamental is that, counties are fundamentally a countywide service provider. We spend most of the discretionary dollars that the county collects on countywide services. And those are things like elections, assessment and taxation, public health, animal services, parks, district attorney, public safety, and justice, basically. And that's really what counties do. The third fundamental is we need everybody else to do their part. And I think that's really important, because counties will never have the resources to do everything that a community needs. And the sum of cities and counties together will not meet all the community's needs. We need the faith community, we need civic organizations, we need nonprofit partners to all do their part also. And then the fourth is that we're going to be mission driven, and the Board of Commissioners basically establishes that mission and all the policies that go with it, and that we're gonna follow the board's direction. So when you think about the requests we got from Helping Hands and what we just know in the community, is that there's a number of organizations, while we don't provide direct services, that there is a partnership role that is vital. And we see that with some of these safety net providers. And in the concept paper, we've identified three, which is Clatsop Community Action, Clatsop County Community Action, Helping Hands, and the Harbor. Each are providing some component of housing services and food and transitional housing to some of the most, the most vulnerable parts of our community. And so again, we're not the direct service provider, but there is a partnership role. So what I have recommended is that we fulfill that partnership role by providing some funding for their bricks and mortar, for their building operations. All of them have facilities that, as we all know, become big drains on operating budgets. And so every dollar that we put into their building support is a dollar that they can free up for their operating. So that's kind of the part A. Part B deals with the small grant program, which we would see as a program to be kicked off fairly quickly here, and it would be $50,000 that would be made available to deal with some of the immediate impacts of the COVID-19 on our critical nonprofit partners. It would be up to $10,000, but this would be a competitive grant that the board would ultimately review. And what we would want to really focus on is some of the transitional and shelter housing needs, services to the unsheltered, including food and hygiene, and then of course rental food and utility assistance. And the goal would be to get this money out sooner than later, and then depending on how long this COVID challenge persists, we might come back to your board after the next fiscal year and see if there's any desire, or if we have the resources to potentially do a second round. So what staff is recommending is that we do both, that we set aside resources on an annual basis, so both for this fiscal year and for next fiscal year for the building operations, because those three organizations that I identified are all being challenged by the COVID impacts. And then also do the Part B, which is a grant program. So I'll leave it there and take your questions and see if any of this makes any sense to your board.
Don, I have a couple questions if I could.
Sure.
One is, how will the amount, I think, first of all, I think you did it, this paper, you did a great job on this paper. It's very clear and well stated, and makes sense. But the amount that will be decided for the operational cost, and then how will the amounts be determined?
Well,
and then also on the small grant, is some of that money going to be coming from the federal government, is this funding going to be coming out of our own budget?
So sure, let me answer the first question. Is that I left it open in the concept paper, but regarding the Part A, but what I was thinking is that we would set aside $50,000 a year for those for that funding, and that would be split somewhere in the neighborhood of $20,000 for Helping Hands, $20,000 for Community Action, and $10,000 for the Harbor. And that's just based upon what their facility sizes are and what their facilities needs are. So there would be $50,000 that would be set aside for that, and then $50,000 for the small grants. And all this money is coming from the county's general fund.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so for the small grant, you said that would be a competitive bid?
Well,
And would that be determined by the Human Advisory Committee or the board?
no, I would
Proceed doing that?
I would see the Board of Commissioners, just given what the time frame is, and we would go through an application process, and we would have to actually process these fairly quickly. And so I would assume that the board, I mean, your board could decide to have some representation outside of the board, but I just think it's such a time-sensitive issue that the more efficient the process we can put into place, probably the better off. So,
And one more question, you said that you're hoping that we would be able to achieve this for this budget cycle and then the following year's budget cycle. So that means that we hope to make these decisions and have them in place, within the next month or two, right? Or sooner, or
no, I think
we
that,
would have to go through the whole budget.
no, if your board is interested in this, we can make this happen this year, and then we would then see what happens on the small grant side for next year and see where we are in the recovery, but the building portion would be included in next year's budget. So we would have resources to start it this year, but then we would also re-budget resources for the next year.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's hear from some of the other commissioners who would like to go.
This is Commissioner Nebeker, and
Okay.
I am in complete support of this. I think the perception of how the county is partnering to help our citizens is essential. Even if it just makes people feel that somebody is caring, but it will do much more than that. And I hope that this will, if the rest of the commissioners agree, and I hope that this will, be out there in the media.
Yes, we will make sure that
Okay,
that
thank you.
happens.
Who else would like to go?
I have a couple of comments.
Okay, Commissioner Webb?
And maybe it's just a matter of semantics, of calling this first tranche building operations and repair fund. Of these three organizations that the staff is proposing, only one of them owns their facility, the other two rent. And so when you talk about, I just think that maybe there's another way to put it. General operating expenses related to facility costs and maintenance. Because I'm assuming that particularly, I know that the harbor and CCA, as renters, they're not really responsible for general building maintenance. So, and I say maybe it's the semantics that I'm having trouble with. But I like the idea of giving them, this is a little bit what I was talking about also with our tourism dollars, the idea of giving them predictable annual basic support, and not making them compete with other nonprofits or special projects. I think that says a lot. I think it's what Commissioner Nebeker was saying about, this is our ongoing support. These are people we think are important in our community. And in the absence of our ability to provide these services, we want to give them basic, predictable support. And I really like that idea. The other thing that I think maybe in the first, what I'm calling general operating expenses, it probably would be a good idea too, to include staff training and development in that, because I know that that's something that is very hard for nonprofits to finance. And I think that if we're in the capacity building process here, that staff training is also very important.
Well,
Are you
and
saying that, go ahead, go ahead, Don.
I was just gonna say, Commissioner, maybe we can broaden it to really, it's really for really any kind of overhead expenses, and so what we might wanna do is just say operating expenses generally, and then they can prioritize for whatever those expenses are, so.
Right. I think we have to include in our general support the things that would be eligible, but we could certainly do that very broadly.
Yeah, cause part of our goal
Thank you,
is,
Commissioner.
part of our goal is to make it easy for them and for us to do the monitoring and the reporting. And certainly they can report every year and let us know what they spent it on. But to try to make it as broad as we possibly can, just to give them the real kind of benefit from the resources and the flexibility that they need.
Right, because that's often, so much of their funding is highly stipulated.
Yes.
And so if we give them that general kind of a baseline, I think that would be huge. I'd also like to add that it was so refreshing to receive this concept paper, because it's wonderfully thought out and very important for all of us. And it was wonderful. Thanks so
Well,
much.
the good or the bad of it, the Commissioner, is that there will be more of this in your future, so more of the concept papers, so.
It's very thoughtful and I think very important for us.
Thank you, Commissioner Webb. Commissioner Quayla, did you want to add anything to the conversation?
No, I just agree. I think that this is well done, and I like the approach very much. I've been a supporter of classic community action for years, and certainly think that they kind of are the clearinghouse for resource area. I wasn't, do they not own the regional food bank? I thought they did own the regional food bank. But
That they did, that facility they did, yeah, but their office, I think, or I'm pretty sure, I may be wrong, but.
Okay, well, I think this is well done, and I agree with it.
Thank you, Commissioner Quayla. Commissioner Thompson, do you have anything you'd like to add to the conversation?
Thank you for permission to speak, Madam Chair. Echoing the others' praise, I am fully in support of having well thought out position papers like this, so well done on that one. The point I'm wondering about, helping understand if you were in collaborative conversations with these three agencies about the unmet need and whether this amount, what impact this amount would have and how much additional unmet need they had, and were we able to partner with them? Or again, I'm looking at an integrative community-wide perspective that this paper also rightly pointed to. So help me understand more, please.
So, Commissioner, this is Don. So on the general operating side, we think that this amount will take a lot of pressure off of each of the three organizations just on their annual overhead costs. In terms of the impacts from the COVID, that is where the $50,000 small grant program is going to augment for some of those organizations, but it's also open to other organizations. And honestly, we don't know what the scope of the need is yet, because we don't know how long this is going to continue. And so on the Part B portion, we're going to go through the first cycle of funding this fiscal year, but then we are open to potentially coming back to your board and asking for a second cycle, depending on what we hear from our nonprofit partners as we go forward. So we're trying to structure this like we have a lot of things during the COVID crisis is by being flexible as much as we can, and by knowing that we're gonna have to kind of learn and do as we go. So I can't answer all of your questions with specificity on the need, because it hasn't been completely defined yet, but what I am assured of is that the money that would go to the general operating for those 3 agencies would be very helpful. And then the money we would have set aside for the small grants certainly are gonna deal with some of the immediate impacts of the COVID. But the caveat is we may be back depending on how long that this lasts.
That's very responsive, thank you, and I wasn't looking for specificity at this point. It occurs to me that what we're taking on through this position paper, if we do, is I wanna say the wider administrative function of the whole county, which is our rightful purview. So I think we're headed toward that. The other thing that I'm deeply appreciative of is that you're saying the board should do this. I absolutely concur that the board should be doing this. So I'm in support of this paper and what you propose. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. So it looks to me that all 5 commissioners have agreed that this is a good plan going forward. What is our next step? Does this have to be officially approved at a board meeting, or what's next?
Well, in regards to the operations piece, that has been budgeted. It's just in a different line item, and the amounts that are being proposed are within Don's limit amounts, and so he can go ahead and make that. In regards to the small grant piece, we would be coming before the board for a budget adjustment.
So
Okay.
if your board is comfortable with the direction, which it sounds like you are, which we appreciate and thank you for your support, we will get the small grants application process designed, and we will share that with your board and a timeline. And while we do that, we will prepare the agenda item for the budget adjustment on that side. And then on the building or the general operating funds, we will move forward with that. So we will be
Well,
back.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, and thank you for all the work that went into this on everyone's part. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Is there anything else that we need to discuss in today's meeting? Does anybody, is there anything else from staff?
No, Commissioner, nothing from staff.
Okay. Me personally, did anybody read my, I sent poetry to everybody and I didn't get any response back.
It was
Come
wonderful.
on now, come on.
It was wonderful.
Commissioner Sullivan, I just read it this morning, and I sent it on to others that I know enjoy reading poetry, so thank you.
Okay, that's all I wanted, thank you. Mark, how are you doing?
And
You got an awful big, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm just looking at Mark. I know he's got an awful lot on his plate with the hospital being the main focus of this COVID-19, and so I just wondered if anything else you want to say, Mark. Mark left. Okay, he's probably got to go. Anyone else like to have any comment?
Actually, could I refer back to what you were asking about Tim Stafford? This just shows how the arts connects people. His writing is a connection for people as they're isolated, and I haven't heard back yet from the people that I sent it to, but I'm sure, I feel confident that I will. And I hope we don't forget how important this
We probably saw
communication
that meme.
is.
Did you see that meme? Probably everybody's seen that meme about if you think arts aren't important, think about Netflix and music and everything that's keeping us sane during this time period.
No, I haven't seen that, but I agree with it, certainly.
Okay, so anyone else before we adjourn the meeting?
I have a question for Commissioner Webb. And since Matt Phillips is center stage on my screen. Oh, Mark's back. Is he? All right.
A phone call, did you
Okay. I have two things. One is that I love the posts that the sheriff is posting on Facebook, et cetera. They're light and very wonderful. The story, the children's book reading was particularly wonderful, and I think, you know, making law enforcement, the face of law enforcement, human is just huge, and I love that. I didn't realize you had such great PR skills. And the second is a question about how did it go this weekend in terms of our beach access issues?
Well, for this weekend, I think that things went really well, actually. We did not receive any complaints to dispatch, at least not that I'm aware of. So it wasn't to the volume that the dispatchers were put off by it. We did have extra staff just to manage and observe what was going on the beach, and they basically got bored. Nothing was happening. So that worked out pretty well. One thing I can offer, though, is that in the beginning of the pandemic, most of the complaints we were fielding, the sheriff's office and dispatch centers, was more related to people aren't following the rules of social isolation or distancing. You know, there's the baristas at Dutch Brothers are standing too close to each other. And that kind of has changed now to where we're getting more complaints about, well, what's your authority to shut beach accesses, when is this in? And so, kind of like what I talked about at the last board meeting, I'm concerned that people's minds are changing and their compliance with the orders will start to change as well. So just keep messaging and getting it out there.
Yeah. Good.
Be on the same page.
And I understand your department put up a lot of signs this weekend and they're still standing.
That's so far. And I would like to take the credit for the social media. I kind of had a vision, but we hired a new employee, and I kind of tasked that to her, and she's just killing it. So
Yeah.
so far, she gets most of the credit.
Good.
Well, good job. Mark, did you want to have a shout out from the hospital sector?
Well, I would just follow up and say I appreciate the sheriff's office and county manager being sensitive to the public, concern. And this is the long-term approach to have here is that, people will ebb and flow as things go and be upset, and then they'll he finds something else to be, concerned about. That's just the nature of this. The uncertainty is so, it weighs on everybody, and then not knowing what's going to happen next is really difficult for people to cope with. So I appreciate both Sheriff Phillips and for having that approach and being realistic and pragmatic in dealing with public, and I think that they've done an excellent job, and I think I'm glad that it was a quite.
Okay, anyone else? All right, well, thank you everyone for coming to this meeting, and we will talk next time.
Thank you.
Bye.